Part 60. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 592. Remember it in 1 second and read wonderful novels for free without pop-ups. The servants of the Su mansion looked at the middle-aged man and said with confidence, "It's absolutely true. I just heard it while hiding outside the door." He looked pale and said, "It's fake, it's all fake. There was no assassination at all, and no one committed it. This is someone deliberately trying to harm our Su family." They also said that they would search the Su family every day and use dragon robes. Feng Guanlei framed the Su family for rebellion. The middle-aged man let go of his collar and took a few steps back, his face suddenly turning pale. As the largest family in the south of the Yangtze River, the Su family has been able to stand firm for so many years. The reason why even the local government has to give them 3 cents is because the government will reason with the Su family. They will not use such tricks of framing to deal with a super family like the Su family, although the Su family has used such tricks to deal with others in recent years, although he is preparing to use more drastic measures than this. How to deal with Tang Ning? But before they took action, the other party actually struck first, more viciously than his method, and his attack was a fatal blow. After all, the Su family is a people, not an official. Since ancient times, the people have not fought with the officials, especially when the officials are unreasonable. They can't fight no matter what. Lu Tong led others out of Su's house, bowed his hands to the 2 people standing in the courtyard, and said, "I'm sorry, it seems that the criminal is really not in Su's house." After saying that, he looked back at the dozens of Blade members and said, "Brothers, let's go." "Wait a minute." Lu Tong took 2 steps and was stopped by Suje. Lu Tong turned around and asked, "Is there anything else?" Suje stepped forward and asked with a smile, "May I ask who was assassinated at the station last night, and was he seriously injured?" Lu Tong glanced at him and said, "The thief assassinated General Zhou Xiaoyi and Mr. Tang, the acting minister of the Ministry of Civil Affairs. However, he did not succeed. If you know the news about the culprit, report it to the government immediately." "Absolutely." Suje cupped his hands and said, "Everyone, go slowly." Lu Tong brought the Blade members in with great fanfare and left with great fanfare, leaving the Su mansion in a mess. The middle-aged man clenched his fists, looked at Suje, and gritted his teeth and said, "Brother, Tang Ning is so insidious and cunning. He is an official. If he really wants to use force, wouldn't he have to kill the Su family?" Suje said nothing, turned and walked into the room behind him. He looked at the messy room and the broken teacups on the ground. After a long time, he said, "Tell Prince Jian about his proposal." The Su family agreed. Xiao Mansion. A young man looked at the Crown Prince of Guizhou and hesitated. "Your Majesty, the Su family does not accept our solicitation. If they inform the government." Prince Jian waved his hand and said, "Suje is an old fox, he will not do this." The young man didn't say anything more. He just sighed and said, "The Su family is the largest family in Jiangnan. If we can win over them, they will definitely be a big boost to our uprising. It's such a pity." After he finished speaking, a servant walked in, raised his head and said, "Your Majesty, the Su family has sent someone." Prince Jian stood up with a hint of joy on his face. "Have they figured it out?" The steward of the Su mansion walked into the hall, bowed to the Crown Prince of Guizhou, and said, "I have met the Crown Prince." "No gifts, no gifts." The Crown Prince of Guizhou came to greet him personally and said, "Butler Su, what do you want to do when you come to my Xiao mansion?" The housekeeper of the Su mansion said, "I have been ordered by the master of the house to bring a message to the prince." Prince Jian looked at him and asked, "What are you talking about?" The steward of the Su mansion said, "The head of the family said that the Su family has agreed to the prince's proposal." "Okay," Prince Jian said with a smile on his face, "the head of the Su family is indeed very discerning." He looked at the steward of the Su family with a smile on his face and said, "Don't worry, as long as you sincerely help me, I will definitely not treat your Suk family badly. The steward of the Suk family looked at him and said, the master hopes that the prince can agree to a condition of the Suk family. The crown prince of Gizhu said, but it doesn't matter. The steward of the Su mansion raised his head and said, the head of the family hopes that after the prince's rebellion, Tang Ning, the acting minister of the Ministry of Civil Affairs, can be handed over to the Suk family for disposal. What about Tang Ning? Prince Jian smiled and said, even if the head of the Suk family doesn't say anything, I won't let him go. After we catch him, we can just hand him over to the Suk family for disposal. The butler cupped his hands and said, the little man will go back to report to the family master. Watching the steward of the Suk family leave, Crown Prince Jian smiled and said, those who know the current affairs are heroes. Suja is indeed a smart man. With the help of the Suk family, we will be even more powerful. The person next to him immediately raised his hands and said, congratulations, Crown Prince. When several people walked back, a figure slowly walked out of the house on the other side. One person looked over there and said in surprise, it's so late, where is Miss Su going? Another person said, Miss Su seems to go out at night and come back in the morning. The crown prince of Gizhu looked gloomy, but he only glanced at it and then looked away. For him, restoration of the country is a top priority, and at this critical moment, nothing can distract him. When this matter is over, it will not be too late to deal with some things and people that need to be dealt with. It was late at night, but the lights were still on in Tang Ning's room inside the inn. There was a piece of information placed in front of him, which he asked the governor of Runzhou to send over. Runzhou is the economic center of Jiangnan, so the imperial court will naturally tightly control local officials and will not let them collude with the wealthy families of Jiangnan. In addition, the court has some other means to control Jiangnan. He just found out that the Bai family, one of the four major families, was supported by the court to compete with the Jiangnan nobles. The information listed on this document is all some evidence of the Suk family's crimes. There are many crimes involved. The accumulation of capital is inseparable from dirt and blood. No one in a big family like the Suk family is clean. Of course, as long as the Suk family has not made any big mistakes, the court will not make things difficult for the first big family in Jiangnan because of these. There are not many people in the court who are really clean. As long as they stand on the right side, these small mistakes are nothing. But once they stand on the wrong side, these small mistakes may push them into the abyss and they will never recover. There is also a letter from the head of the Bai family, reminding him to be careful of the Suk family. The letter said that when he and the head of the Suk family talked about Tang Ning, the acting assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Su Zhe once said that he would take good care of him. Given the relationship between Tang Ning and the Tang family, this care naturally does not mean to take care of him. I think the Tang family must have specifically told them before he came to Jiangnan. Tang Ning did not want to be taken care of for nothing, so he decided to take care of each other with the Suk family. He put away the information and prepared to rest when he found that Su Mei had been lying on the bed and sleeping soundly. Her insomnia was not caused by external reasons, but a mental illness. I don't know if Dr. Sun can do anything. Unfortunately, he travels all over the world and his whereabouts are hard to find. For now, he can only continue. Fortunately, this is Jiangnan. If Tang Yaoyao knew that Suhuli slept in the same bed with him at night, even if nothing happened, it would be a sure scene that he could not imagine. Tang Ning hugged a quilt again and slept beside her in his clothes. A sense of uneasiness inexplicably surged in his heart, but it made it difficult for him to fall asleep for a while. Early in the morning, Runzhou Post Station. Before dawn, Chen Zhou habitually got up first. After washing up, he came to the yard to practice whip techniques. Although he used a knife, no one knew that he was best at whipping. He just shook his wrist, and there was a sound like tearing silk in his ears, and the ground soil splashed, and a shallow pit was hit by the whip. Even the blue bricks were like this, and this whip fell on the body, it would be a blood hole, hitting the fatal part, and there was no doubt that death would be achieved. When he was about to swing the whip for the second time, there was a hurried knock on the door outside. Chen Zhou put away the whip, walked to the door, opened the door, looked at the woman standing at the door, and was stunned at first. He rubbed his eyes, and when he looked over again, he was shocked and said, Third madam. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 593. Chapter 590 of the main text of Ruyi Xiaolang Jun Tang Yao Yao strode in from the door, looked at Chen Zhou, and asked, Where is your master, has he gotten up? Not yet. Chen Zhou was stunned for a moment, then immediately came to his senses and said, Madam is tired from the journey, please move to the front hall and wait, I will go to inform the master. No need. Tang Yao Yao waved his hand, looked around, and said, Which room does he live in? I will go and call him myself. Chen Zhou's body trembled, this. Tang Yao Yao looked at him suspiciously, You don't know which room he lives in. If he doesn't even know where his master lives, then he is too incompetent as a personal guard. This answer also has a taste of trying to cover up. But if he really takes his wife there, he is afraid that his personal guard will also be the end. Looking at Tang Yao Yao with an expectant face, Chen Zhou still nodded and said, I know, I will take my wife there. At this time, it was not yet dawn, and there was no figure in the post station. Chen Zhou led Tang Yao Yao through 2 doors and walked into a courtyard. As soon as he stepped into the courtyard, he shouted loudly, Sir, the third lady is here. Sir, are you up? Sir, the third lady has come to Jiangnan. In just a few steps, Chen Zhou shouted more than 10 times, his voice was like a bell, and I'm afraid that people in the next courtyard would be woken up. Tang Yao Yao walked to the door, Tang Ning's door was closed, Chen Zhou was about to shout loudly, but was interrupted by Tang Yao Yao's wave. You don't have to shout, I'll go in by myself. Tang Yao Yao said to Chen Zhou, walked to the window, shook her head and said, You are still so careless, you don't even close the window when you sleep. She opened the window wider, and jumped in from the window. Chen Zhou stood there in a daze. After a moment of stunned, he put his hands together, muttered a few words, looked at the door again, and walked away silently. In the room, Tang Ning opened his sleepy eyes and murmured, What are you arguing about? Just when he was dreaming about fighting Tang Yejing for 300 rounds and finally riding on her to avenge his previous shame, he heard Chen Zhou's voice, which woke him up from his beautiful dream. Last night, he discussed some things with Su Mei and slept very late. When he woke up, he habitually touched his side, but Su Mei was gone. She came late at night every day and left before dawn. Tang Ning was used to it. He was about to take a nap and continue fighting Tang Yejing. When he turned over, he found a figure beside the bed. Seeing Tang Yao Yao standing beside his bed, Tang Ning realized that he was not awake at all, and he still had a chance to make his dream come true. Tang Yao Yao looked at the sleepy Tang Ning, raised her hand and was about to speak, but he took her hand and pulled her to the bed with a little more force. Tang Ning hugged her tightly, closed his eyes, and said vaguely, Stop talking nonsense, let's fight for another 300 rounds. Tang Yao Yao was lying on the bed, hugged by him, her face was blushing, her heart was pounding, she reached out to push him away, but after reaching out her hand, she just gently placed it on his chest. She looked up at Tang Ning who was sleeping again, twisted her body a few times, adjusted a comfortable position, and gently closed her eyes. Worried about missing them again, she arrived in Runzhou this morning after traveling day and night, and was already very tired. She lay in Tang Ning's arms and fell asleep quickly. Chen Zhou stood in the yard, but his attention was all on the closed door. After waiting for a long time, the chaotic scene he imagined did not appear, and the room was still quiet. A trace of doubt appeared on his face, and after thinking about it, this doubt turned into admiration. Tang Ning slept very soundly last night. Even after waking up, he felt the softness and fragrance in his arms. The one who slept with him last night was Sumei, so the one he was hugging now was also thinking of this. Tang Ning was shocked and lost all sleepiness. He and Sumei slept together, but they slept separately, without even taking off their clothes. When she fell asleep in his arms, the nature was completely different. The next moment, Tang Ning realized that the one in his arms was not Sumei. Because the size was not right. Rather than saying that he was hugging Sumei, it was more like hugging Tang Yao Yao. Tang Ning looked down and saw Tang Yao Yao. Tang Yao Yao was in the capital now, and it was impossible for her to appear in Jiangnan. This dream was real enough and lasted long enough. She was far away in Jiangnan. If he wanted to see them, he could only dream. Tang Ning kissed her forehead and said, "Remember to bring them both here next time." Tang Yao Yao opened her eyes and asked, "Are you awake?" Tang Ning looked at her in surprise. "You can still speak." In his dreams, people never speak. This was the first time he heard Tang Yao Yao's voice in his dream, and it was so clear as the real thing. Tang Yao Yao glanced at him. "Do you think you are dreaming?" Tang Ning looked at her, thought for a while, and said, "Pinch me." Chen Zhou was standing in the yard. Hearing a scream from the room, his face changed. Looking at the several sharp blade members who came quickly, he waved his hand and said, "Go, go, the adults are fine." Inside the room, Tang Ning looked at Tang Yao Yao in surprise and joy, and asked, "Why are you here?" Tang Yao Yao was very satisfied with his surprised expression and said casually, "I came to see Jiangnan's business and to see you by the way." Tang Ning certainly understood her hypocrisy. He knew whether she was here to see someone or to do business. After Tang Yao Yao finished speaking, she looked down at the bed and said, "You are sleeping alone, why do you need two quilts?" Tang Ning looked at Tang Yao Yao and explained, "It's a bit cold in Jiangnan at night. It's warm to cover yourself with two quilts." If he said that the other quilt was for Sumei, this touching scene of a couple's reunion would immediately turn into a human tragedy. If he saw Sumei in bed, she might think that he came to Jiangnan just to meet Suhuli in private, and he would not even have room for explanation. The arrival of Tang Yejing was a very happy thing. Tang Ning was somewhat glad that she came at the right time. If she came half an hour earlier, the consequences would be disastrous. The two got up, washed, and walked out of the yard. Chen Zhou stood outside the yard and immediately bowed and said, "Hello, sir, hello, madam." Tang Ning looked at him and realized that the voice he heard in the morning was not an illusion. Outside the yard, Lao Zheng was squatting on the ground brushing his teeth without raising his head. He was surprised and asked, "Why did Miss Su leave so late today?" Tang Yao Yao's face changed and asked, "What Miss Su?" Lao Zheng raised his head and saw Tang Yao Yao standing next to Tang Ning. He swallowed the mouthwash, wiped his mouth, and said, "Miss Tang, good morning." Tang Yao Yao looked at him and asked, "What Miss Su?" Lao Zheng was stunned and asked, "Did I say Miss Su just now?" Tang Yao Yao said with a gloomy face, "Yes." That night, inside the post station, Su Mei was in Xiao's house. Unless she came over on her own initiative, Tang Ning would not be able to see her at all, nor could he pass on any information to her. Tang Ning sat at the table, looking at Tang Yao Yao who was sitting opposite him and glaring at him. He hoped that Su Mei would not come over tonight. Squeak. As soon as this thought came to his mind, the gap in the window of the room gradually widened. Su Mei jumped in from outside and said, "After this incident, you should stay in Jiangnan for a few more days. When you return to the capital, there will be few opportunities to sleep together." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 594. Chapter 591 of the main volume of Ruyi Little Man has nothing to do with her update. After Sumei came in, she closed the window, took off her coat, and then turned to look into the room. Then she put her coat on again. Tang Yaoyao stood up and looked at Sumei with an unkind look on her face. Tang Ning felt that she was wronged. It would be fine if he and Sumei had anything to do with each other, but he was just Sumei's sleeping pill to treat insomnia. Are sleeping pills sinful? Obviously not, but Fairy Tang wouldn't believe it. He looked at Tang Yaoyao and said, I can explain. Tang Yaoyao said expressionlessly, get out. Tang Ning looked at Sumei, gave her a look, turned around and walked out, then closed the door behind her. The meaning of that look was to tell her not to embarrass Tang Yaojiao. In the current situation, although Suhuhu seemed to be at a disadvantage, if there was a real fight, Tang Yaojiao would definitely not be her opponent. He walked to the courtyard. Chen Zhou stood in the courtyard and said apologetically, I'm sorry, sir, Miss Su just went in before she had time to listen to my explanation. Tang Ning waved her hand and said, I don't blame you. Naturally, he had to taste the bitter fruits of what he had sown. He just hoped that there wouldn't be a fight inside for a while. If the two of them started to fight, Tang Ning wouldn't be able to stop them. Just in case, after thinking about it, he looked at Chen Zhou and said, go and call Lao Zheng. If a fight breaks out later, only Lao Zheng can control the situation. He is the one who started this matter, and he will be responsible to the end. The old man walked in slowly. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, did you do this on purpose? Lao Zheng did not deny it, looked at him and said, such a beautiful girl can't keep following you secretly. You have to give others a name. Tang Ning said angrily, she is my sister. Lao Zheng curled his lips and said, it sounds like your wife is not your sister. The situation was stronger than the person. Tang Ning remembered this debt with him first. After he practiced for decades more, he didn't believe that Lao Zheng, who had to walk with crutches, could beat him. Within the room, Sumei walked to the table, poured herself a cup of tea, took a sip and said, isn't this the third lady of the Tang family? Why are you here in Jiangnan? Tang Yaoyao glared at her, gritted his teeth and said, fox. I think so too. Sumei shrugged and said nonchalantly, I am a shameless vixen. You don't know, most of the women in the capital call me Humiiza behind their backs. You. Tang Yaoyao pointed at her, her tone stagnant. Sumei admitted so generously that she didn't know what she wanted to say. Her chest bulged with anger, and she snorted, fox. Sumei glanced at her chest and said unexpectedly, I haven't seen you for a few months, and it seems a little bigger than before. Tang Yaoyao looked down and subconsciously blurted out, really? As soon as the words came out of her mouth, she realized that now was not the time to say this. She raised her chest higher, glared at her, and said angrily, vixen. Sumei grabbed her left wrist and rolled up her sleeve, revealing a red scar on her arm. Tang Yaoyao glanced at it with a stunned expression. As a woman, she naturally knows the existence of gong gong sand. This kind of medicine applied to a woman's body will not disappear all year round, and will only disappear with the disappearance of chastity. However, not all women would like the palace sand. Although she had never seen it, she had heard of it. The vixen's guardian sand is still there, doesn't that mean she is still a virgin? How could this be possible? How could they still sleep together every day? Tang Yaoyao's face turned red when she thought of herself, and she stopped thinking about it. After knowing this, she glanced at Sumei again, and most of the resentment in her heart had dissipated. She looked at Sumei, showed the momentum of the third lady, and said, explain it. It's very simple. Sumei looked at her and said, I have insomnia, and I can sleep peacefully only if I sleep next to him. He is my medicine, that's all. Who is your medicine? Tang Yao Yao glared at her and said dissatisfied, how do I know whether what you said is true or false? Even if it is true, you can't sleep with someone else's husband. How can I get married in the future like this? Who said I would get married in the future? Su Mei looked at her, and when Tang Yao Yao felt a little guilty, she sighed softly and said, do you think everyone is like you, with such good luck? Tang Yao Yao suppressed her pride, glanced at her mouth, and said, what good luck do I have? Su Mei looked at her and asked, isn't it good luck to marry someone you truly love? Tang Yao Yao's face turned red, who really loves each other? We are friends. If I hadn't been forced to do so, I wouldn't have pretended to marry him. It turns out you guys got married in a fake way. Su Mei looked at her, blinked, and asked, then what reason do you have to care about our affairs? Tang Yao Yao put her hands on her hips and said, although we are a fake marriage, we have also gone to the wedding hall. As long as I am still in the Tang family, I am the third wife of the Tang family, and I have reason to take care of the vixens outside. Su Mei shook her head and said, I just don't think it's worth it for him. He likes you so much. It turns out you only treat him as a friend. I'm going to tell him now and let him give up. Stop, Tang Yao Yao stood up in a panic and said, well, they are not all friends, there is still a little bit of like, a little bit. After saying that, she looked at Su Mei, curled her lips, and said, who does he like? How do you know? I know what men are thinking. Su Mei smiled, looked at her, and asked, do you want to know who his favorite woman is? Tang Yao Yao pretended to look at her casually and asked, who? Su Mei leaned close to her ear and whispered, I won't tell you. You, Tang Yao Yao's chest swelled up again with anger, snorted coldly, and said, who knows? Su Mei did not feel proud of angering Tang Yao Yao. She looked at her with a complicated expression, and said after a long time, in fact, among all people, I envy you the most. Tang Yao Yao looked at her and said uncertainly, envy me. She couldn't understand why a woman who was better at martial arts than her, prettier than her, and even had bigger breasts than her needed to envy her. Su Mei sighed and said, if we can change, even if I am not so beautiful, even if I become the same as you, I am willing. I won't change with you. Tang Yao Yao was halfway through her words, stunned for a moment, and then angrily said, hey, vixen, what do you mean? Su Mei didn't say anything more, waved her hand, and said, let's go. She opened the door, and when Tang Ning came to meet her, Su Mei waved her hand and said, explain it to your wife. After that, she walked straight to the courtyard. When Tang Ning looked back, she saw a lonely figure flying over the courtyard wall. After her figure disappeared, there was only a lonely moon in the sky. He walked into the room. Tang Yao Yao was still angry, and said dissatisfiedly, do you know what it means that men and women should not touch each other? You slept in the same bed with her just a few days after leaving the capital. If you leave the capital for a year, you will not even give birth to a baby. Tang Ning hurriedly explained, this matter is not what you think. Tang Yao Yao said angrily, what is it like? Explain it. Tang Ning said, listen to me and explain it slowly. Tang Yao Yao covered her ears and kept nagging, I don't want to listen, I don't want to listen, I don't want to listen, you go back and explain it to me. Runzhou is prosperous, and it is even more prosperous at night than during the day. There is never a curfew. In the night market, there is an endless stream of hawking, whether it is clothes, hats, fans, bonsai, flowers, or fish, pork, sheep, cakes, candied fruits, seasonal fruits, there are restrictions. On the main street of Runzhou, the night is no different from the day. The streets and alleys are bustling with people buying and selling, and the restaurants are singing. It is not until dawn that the pedestrians are few. By then, there are already vendors in the morning market who have gotten up early to prepare. It is the beginning of the night market, the busiest time in the city. A new brothel has opened in a certain street today. Firecrackers and gongs are blasting, and fireworks are dragging long tails into the night sky, exploding into countless silver flowers. The fireworks are rare. People on the street stop and look up. There are endless cheers and screams. It is so lively. A figure slowly walks in the crowd, facing the dazzling fireworks, without looking up. The fire in the night sky illuminates her side face, which is more dazzling than fireworks, and brightens this world. This world is lively, but this liveliness has nothing to do with her. Read it. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 595. Chapter 592 of the main text of Ruyi Little Man. The reasonable third madam didn't know what Sumei and Tang Yaoyao said. Although she seemed very angry, she didn't care about what happened just now. Compared to Tang Yaoyao, who was carefree and didn't take anything to heart, Tang Ning was actually more worried about Sumei. She seemed to be more mature and steady, but because of her life experience, her heart was softer than anyone else's. He thought for a while, and when he looked at Tang Yaoyao, he found that her eyes were dangerous. Tang Yaoyao narrowed her eyes and asked, "Are you still thinking about that vixen?" No. Tang Ning shook her head, looked at her, and said, "Let me tell you a story." Although she didn't get any advantage from Sumei at night, after knowing that the truth was not what she imagined, Tang Yaoyao was in a good mood overall. She sat down again and said, "Let's talk." Tang Ning poured 2 cups of tea, and after sitting down, she said, "Once upon a time, there was a family of 4 who fled to avoid a famine. A 5-year-old girl followed her parents and younger brother around and could only drink a little porridge every day. Even so, they still didn't have enough food. Later, in order to feed her younger brother, her parents abandoned her on the road alone. In order to survive, she ate leaves and bark, and was almost beaten to death for grabbing a piece of fresh bark from others. Tang Yaoyao, who was born the daughter of a richest man and had never had to worry about food, and had never eaten leaves or bark, looked at him nervously and asked, "What happened to the little girl later?" "Later, the little girl was rescued." Tang Ning drank a cup of tea to moisten her throat and said, "The person who rescued her fed her, clothed her, and taught her kung fu." Tang Yaoyao breathed a sigh of relief and said, "The person who saved her is really a good person." Tang Ning shook her head and said, "The person who rescued her only took a fancy to her qualifications and taught her kung fu. He also wanted her to do things for him. She only regarded her as a tool and asked her to practice hard every day. She was not allowed to. She rests." Although Tang Yaoyao was pampered since childhood, she did not have the temperament of a young lady. Instead, she was easily overflowing with sympathy. She bought all the girls sold in the dental shop in the capital. When she heard this, she slammed the table and said angrily, "How unreasonable, the little girl is already pitiful, but the person who saved her still treats her like this. Is he still a human being?" After scolding her, she looked at Tang Ning and asked, "What happened next?" Tang Ning breathed a sigh of relief and said slowly, "Later, the little girl slowly grew up. She was beautiful since she was a child. When she grew up, she became a peerless beauty who turned all living beings upside down. She was sought after by countless people, but her fate was completely in the hands of others. She was forced to do things for them and could rarely rest. As a result, she suffered from insomnia and had difficulty falling asleep every night. To confuse all living beings, a peerless beauty." Tang Yaoyao seemed to have thought of something, looked at him and asked, "This little girl is who? Is she Sumei?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "Others only know that she is the most beautiful woman in the capital, but they don't know that there is such a past behind her." Tang Yaoyao is the other person in Tang Ning's words. Sumei's reputation in the capital is so great that no one knows about her. She only knows that she is the most beautiful woman in the capital. Countless people admire her, but they don't know that she is the most beautiful woman in the capital. His life experience was so rough, he was abandoned by his parents, taken advantage of by his benefactor, and had no relatives in the world. Just looking at Sumei's daily behavior, one would never have guessed this. Only now did she understand why Sumei envied her. She suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. She looked at Tang Ning and asked, "But why doesn't she have insomnia when she sleeps with you?" Tang Ning shook her head and said she didn't know either. Tang Yao Yao thought for a while, gritted her teeth and said, "Then, let her sleep in your room tomorrow. When she falls asleep, you can go to sleep in another room. She is my sister after all." Tang Ning knew Tang Yao Yao better than herself. She was hard-spoken and soft-hearted, prone to overflowing with sympathy. She seemed to be unruly and arrogant, but was actually reasonable. This was also the cutest thing about her. "Let's talk tomorrow." When Tang Ning walked to the door, fireworks exploded in the sky in the distance. He stopped to watch for a moment before closing the door. Tang Yaozai glanced at him and asked, "What are you doing?" "Sleep." Tang Ning glanced at her in surprise and asked, "Aren't you still asleep?" Tang Yao Yao said, I sleep in another room." "Don't bother, it's not like I haven't slept with her before." Tang Ning helped her spread the quilt and said, "The third lady of the Tang family came to Jiangnan, but they could only sleep in separate rooms. If they saw it, what would they think of me?" Tang Yao Yao snorted coldly and said secretly, "Just sleep, I'm afraid of you." It is the normal development of the reunion of the little ones, otherwise the guys like Sharp Blade would think that he is not good enough, and he cannot lose this face in front of his subordinates. It is true that Tang Yao Yao did not come to Jiangnan specifically to see him. The Tang family also has industries in Jiangnan. Although their business in Jiangnan is not as big as Lingzhou and Jingxi, and cannot be compared with the four major families, it can still make people happy. She found an excuse to come to Jiangnan to visit. Tang Ning had nothing to do in the past 2 days. Gong Sunying was out on an important mission, and the exams for officials in Runzhou were also going on in an orderly manner. The Crown Prince of Guizhou was preparing to start a rebellion, and the Su family decided to provide them with help. While Tang Ning is waiting for them to rebel, she can also go shopping with Tang Yao Yao and take her to taste Runzhou's food and see the scenery of Jiangnan. The great poets of ancient times have praised Jiangnan generously, and Jiangnan deserves all the praise. In addition to the unbearable continuous plum rain, the climate and beautiful scenery of Jiangnan are indeed more livable. When the boat reached a certain place, Tang Yao Yao tapped her toes and flew from the center of the river to the shore, and the oars in the hands of the boatman fell into the water. Tang Ning left a silver ingot as compensation for the oars, and then imitated Tang Yao Yao's behavior. If Tang Yao Yao hadn't pulled him ashore, he might have flown into the river. Tang Ning can now accept the fact that she is not as good as Tang Yao Yao or Sumei. No matter how powerful her martial arts are, she still has to sleep in the same bed with him at night. Tang Yao Yao rolled her eyes at him, pointed to the front, and said, "That's our shop." The shop in front is the Tang family's shop, but it's not theirs. Fortunately, the rich man Tang is not here, otherwise he will definitely think that he abducted his daughter for the Tang family's property. In fact, Tang Ning had no interest in money. In his eyes, Tang Yao Yao was much more important than the cold silver. Tang Ning and Tang Yao Yao walked into the shop. A steward looked up and immediately came out and bowed, saying, "Hello, miss, hello, son-in-law." Tang Ning had some impression of the steward. He should have come with Tang Yao Yao from the capital this time. Tang Yao Yao looked around and asked, "Where is Uncle Joe? I haven't seen him for many years." The steward said, "Staff Joe is in the back. I'll go call him." Tang Yao Yao found a seat and sat down, saying, "Uncle Joe used to be in Lingzhou, and later he was in charge of the business in Jiangnan. I haven't seen him for 10 years. Not long after, the steward led someone out from the back. A middle-aged man was leaning on a cane, but his steps were very fast. He walked in front of Tang Yaoyao and said excitedly, "I haven't seen you for so many years. Miss has grown up so much." After he finished speaking, he looked at Tang Ning again and said, "This must be the son-in-law, he is really handsome, and he is a perfect match for the young lady." Tang Yaoyao looked at one of his legs and frowned, "Uncle Joe, what's wrong with your leg?" Manager Joe smiled and said, "It was accidentally injured before, and it's not a problem now." A clerk who was cleaning the shop turned his head, showing indignation on his face, and whispered, "What do you mean by accidentally injured? It was beaten by those bastards of the Su family." Manager Joe stared at him and said in a deep voice, "Zhu Zi." The clerk looked at him, turned around helplessly and walked out. "Stop," Tang Yaoyao looked at the clerk and asked, "What did you say just now? Say it again." Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 596. The 593rd chapter of the text of Ruyi Xiaolang Jun, This is Love. The clerk said indignantly, "It's because the Tang family's jade business is better than the Su family's, and they took their business, so the third son of the Su family brought people to break the legs of Manager Joe. Unless it is a monopoly, it is very common for merchants to compete for business. Some of these competitions are benign, and some are malignant. The Su family, relying on itself as the largest family in Jiangnan, can naturally bully these small merchants at will. In their eyes, this is not a big deal." Tang Yaoyao looked at him and asked, "What about the government? Will the government not care?" "The government, how dare the government care about the Su family?" the young man said. "If the Su family doesn't cause trouble for them, they will burn incense and worship Buddha." Tang Yaoyao's face was full of anger, and he slapped the table and said angrily, "How can this be?" Tang Ning grabbed her hand and rubbed it with heartache, saying, "Don't be angry, the government doesn't care, we will." "Absolutely not," Manager Joe hurriedly said, "the son-in-law and the young lady have just come to Jiangnan, and they don't know the ability of the Su family. This is Runzhou, not the capital. I can't beat the Su family. Runzhou is also the territory of the Chen Kingdom. As long as you are in the territory of the Chen Kingdom, you must abide by the king's law." Tang Ning looked at him and said, "The surname of Chen is Zhao, not Su. Except for your majesty, everyone must abide by the king's law." Tang Ning looked at the clerk and said, "Help Manager Joe prepare a car to go to the governor's office." Manager Joe looked anxious and hurriedly said, "Son-in-law, miss. Don't worry, the Su family dare not go against the court." Tang Ning waved and said, "Wait for us at the governor's office." After that, he took Tang Yaoyao's hand and walked out. Just now he just rubbed Tang Yaoyao's palms, but now they interlocked their fingers. Tang Yaoyao pretended not to notice, turned her head to look at him, and asked, "Is the Su family very powerful?" Tang Ning said, "The largest family in Jiangnan is the Su family." "The largest family?" Tang Yaoyao hesitated and asked, "Does the government really dare to control them?" "If the government can't control them, I will." Tang Ning looked at her and said, "I can't let Manager Joe get hurt by saying son-in-law." Tang Yaoyao felt sweet in her heart, walking hand in hand with him on the street. At a certain moment, she actually had the idea of staying in Jiangnan forever. The next moment she felt ashamed for having such an idea, and said sorry to Xiao Ru and Xiao Yi several times in her heart. If they stayed in Jiangnan forever, what would they do? It would be better to stay for only 10 days or half a month. Tang Ning went back to the post station first, took Chen Zhou and Lu Tong with them, and then went to the governor's mansion with Tang Yaoyao. Manager Zhou and his men had already arrived, pacing anxiously at the gate of the mansion. When he saw Tang Ning and Tang Yaoyao coming over, he said with difficulty, "Son-in-law, miss, let's go back." "Since you are here, come in and sit down." Tang Ning smiled and strode in. This was not his first time to the governor's mansion of Runzhou. The governor of Runzhou and local officials personally welcomed him the previous times. When the clerk of the governor's mansion saw him, he ran to the back court quickly. After a while, the governor of Runzhou hurried out, bowed, and said, "Lord Tang, I wonder what important matter you have." In fact, the governor of Runzhou's official position was 2 levels higher than Tang Ning's, but on the one hand, he was a Beijing official and an official of the Ministry of Personnel, and on the other hand, Runzhou was in chaos, and suppressing the rebellion was a headache. Even if his official position was high, he had to be respectful when he met Tang Ning. Manager Zhou looked at Tang Ning and said in a daze, "Sir." He had the honor of meeting the governor of Runzhou several times. Each time, he was surrounded by people like a star surrounded by the moon. This was the first time he saw him acting like a lower-ranking person. The manager from the capital whispered something in his ear, and Manager Zhou's eyes changed immediately when he looked at Tang Ning. "It's nothing serious." Tang Ning looked at the governor of Runzhou and said, "It's just that there was a case involving a friend, so I came to the governor's mansion with him to report the case." He looked at Manager Zhou and said, "If there is any injustice, you can tell the governor in detail." After knowing Tang Ning's identity, Manager Zhou's fear of the Su family was swept away, and he told the governor of Runzhou the whole incident. "How ridiculous!" The governor of Runzhou showed an angry expression on his face and said, "Don't worry, I will definitely take care of this matter for you." He looked behind and said, "Come on, bring Suji to me." Suji is the 3rd son of the Su family. A few days ago, he would not offend the Su family for a small businessman, but now the situation is different. With the imperial sword, the real person in charge of Runzhou city has become the person in front of him. Now that Jiangnan is in chaos, if the Su family offends this person, it is still unknown whether they can sit firmly on the position of the 4 major families. This is a choice that does not need to be hesitated at all. Before coming to the governor's mansion, Manager Zhou had never thought that the governor of Runzhou would be so straightforward when dealing with the affairs of the Su family. He bowed his hands and said, "Thank you, sir." The governor of Runzhou waved his hand and said, "No need to thank me. I am the parent official of Runzhou. This is what I should do." Su family. A constable from the governor's mansion looked at the housekeeper of the Su mansion and said, "We are here to arrest the criminal Suji on the orders of the governor. Please cooperate." The housekeeper of the Su mansion frowned at him and asked, "May I ask what crime my 3rd son has committed?" The constable said expressionlessly, "You will know when you arrive at the government office." In a courtyard somewhere in the Su mansion, a young man hugged a tree and shouted, "I won't go. I don't want to go to jail. You are so brave to arrest our Su family." A constable grabbed him and tried to pull him down from the tree, saying, "The country has its own laws, and the family has its own rules. If the 3rd young master is innocent, he will be back soon." "I won't go." The young man hugged the tree tightly and shouted, "It's just a life. How much money do they want? I will give them." The constable looked at him and said uncertainly, "Human life." He looked at the 3rd young master of the Su family again, looked at the person behind him, and said, "Write it down." The 3rd young master of the Su family was eventually taken away by the people of the governor's office. During this process, the head of the Su family did not show up at all. In a side hall, Suje took a sip of tea, looked at the person who came in, and asked, "Gone?" Suje nodded and said, "Suji was taken away by them." "Is the governor of Runzhou crazy? He came to our Su family to ask for people because of this matter." "Not the governor of Runzhou." Suje shook his head and said, "It seems that he really wants to kill my Su family." He gently covered the lid of the teacup and said, "Tell the Prince of Jian that it can start." The Tang family, not the Su family, has a life and death feud with Tang Ning. The criminals are divided into principals and accomplices. The Su family is at most the lackeys of the Tang family and accomplices of the attempted crime. He didn't actually think of killing the Su family, but rebellion is a serious crime that can kill 9 generations of the family. One person's rebellion often involves hundreds of people. The Su family and the Tang family are related by marriage, and even Tang Shui's mother is a member of the Su family. If the Su family really rebels, the Tang family will be abolished immediately, but Tang Shui will not be spared either. Tang Ning is willing to see the Tang family abolished, but he does not want to see hundreds of people from the Su family lined up waiting to be executed, nor does he want Tang Shui to be involved. For him, achieving the goal is important, but the process is equally important. The Su family has committed many bad deeds and should be punished, but not in this way. While he was thinking about these things, Tang Yaoyao walked in from outside, looked out the window, and asked, "Why hasn't she come here today?" Xiao Mansion, a quiet courtyard somewhere. Baijin pushed open the door, walked in, looked at Su Mei who was sitting at the table in a daze, and asked, "Aren't you going out tonight?" Su Mei didn't look up, and said softly, "His third wife is here, and I won't go out anymore." Baijin glanced at her and asked, "How many young men in the capital who have not married are fascinated by you? You are dismissive of them, but you are distracted by another man with a family. Do you know what this is?" Su Mei looked at her and said, "You said it was cheap." Baijin glanced at her and said, "This is love." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 597. Chapter 594 of the main volume of Ruyi Xiaolang Jun. The Emperor is shocked. In the room, Baijin looked at Su Mei and asked, "With your appearance, what kind of man can't be found? Why did you choose him?" The corners of Su Mei's lips curved up, and she chuckled, "He is good to me." Baijin said, "As long as you are willing, there will be someone who treats you better than him." Su Mei shook her head and said, "But they are not him." The word love hurts people. Baijin looked at her and said, "Your qualifications are much better than those of Gong Sun Ying back then." Gong Sun Ying was misled by love. I hope you will not follow in her footsteps. Su Mei raised her head and looked at her and said, "I think Master Gong Sun has a more interesting life than you." Baijin frowned and asked, "Her? She at least knows what liking means." Su Mei looked at her and asked curiously, "Have you ever liked someone in your life?" Baijin said indifferently, "No." Boring woman. Su Mei stood up, waved her hands lazily, and said, "Go to bed." She kicked off her shoes, was too lazy to take off her clothes, and wrapped herself in the quilt. There was no warm quilt tonight. She curled up, closed her eyes, and said, "Remember to close the door when you leave." Baijin stood up, walked to the door, waved his sleeves, and turned off the oil lamp on the table. She closed the door but did not leave immediately. She raised her head and glanced at the clear moon in the sky. Thinking of Su Mei's question just now, a figure appeared in her mind. The figure had long been blurred and could not be seen clearly. It vaguely looked like a young boy. She could no longer remember what happened to that boy. She only vaguely remembered a bright smile. That was also the smile from decades ago. This smile, everything else has long since disappeared along with the past events. Su Mei didn't come over last night. When Tang Ning got up in the morning, she gently pushed away Tang Yaoyao, who was holding him between her two long legs and putting an arm on his chest. She got out of bed and walked out of the room. Chen Zhou had been waiting outside for a long time. He handed him a secret letter and said, "Sir, this is what Senior Gong Sun sent back quickly." Gong Sun Ying went out to perform a secret mission. Tang Ning opened the secret letter and found that the content in the letter was not much different from what he expected. The top general of the Taizhu garrison and several of his subordinate generals were bewitched, and a force secretly forced them to obey orders. Gong Sun Ying helped them get rid of the poison, and then rushed to the next state. Prince Jian was so confident in this rebellion that he would not only control one Taizhu. In addition, Some news also came from Runzhou. There are rumors that the emperor sent people to the south of the Yangtze River this time to seize money from the wealthy gentry and wealthy people in the south of the Yangtze River to fill the empty treasury. The officials and businessmen whose homes were ransacked are examples. The national treasury is out of money, so it will pay attention to the gentry and wealthy people. Later, it will increase mining and commercial taxes, etc., in order to use Jiangnan to replenish the national treasury. As soon as this news came out, people in Runzhou were suddenly panicked. After enjoying generous treatment for many years, the local wealthy families and wealthy businessmen naturally do not want to suffer losses and suffer losses for nothing. The common people were even more panicked. Although these measures taken by the court would not fall on them, it was obvious that the losses suffered by the wealthy families would be made up for by them. In the final analysis, these measures would still have the greatest impact on them. The four major families have been based in Runzhou for many years and have already divided up the cake. Runzhou's wealthy gentry all follow the four major families. Each of them affects one party. This time, the rumors first came from the Su family's territory. What was spread here quickly spread to other places, spreading throughout Runzhou. Outside Runzhou city, in a field somewhere, two farmers were squatting on the ground chatting after working. I heard that the imperial court is going to attack Jiangnan this time, and the future will not be easy. Jiangnan supports and provides for the imperial court. It's not enough for them to use our money and take our food. Now they want to drink our blood and eat our flesh. The people in the north are human beings, but the people in Jiangnan are not human beings. If you don't give the people a good life, they are still trying to make things difficult for us. What's the use of such a court? It's better to do the opposite. Hey, don't say this nonsense. Why are you talking nonsense? If you change the court, maybe life will be easier. When they said this, the two of them couldn't help lowering their voices. After they couldn't hear what they said, Tang Ning walked through the path in the fields and got into a carriage on the official road. The Su family chose to help the Crown Prince of Guizhou to rebel, using the same old trick of inciting public opinion. The reason why routines become routines is because they work. When the Crown Prince of Guizhou rebels, 1,000 soldiers and horses can suppress it. When the people of Jiangnan rebel, 10 times as many elite soldiers have to be sent here. Ultimately, this is a matter of public opinion. Tang Ning was not worried about Jiangnan. Everything here was within his expectation and control. What he was worried about was the north and the western regions. The north and the western regions rebelled, and Jiangnan rebelled again, which only made matters worse. If Jiangnan did not rebel, Chen state would still face chaos in the northwest. If he was unprepared for this, he would be caught off guard by both sides. By the time the court reacted, the northwest would be the land completely fell into the hands of others. Calculating the time, the secret letter should be sent to the capital, hoping to attract Emperor Chen's attention and make early preparations. Capital. After Prime Minister Feng resigned and a group of Jiangnan officials were dismissed, the capital has been really quiet for a while. The only thing that is not peaceful is that some people living along the street are always awakened by strange movements outside at night. Those who were more courageous looked through the cracks in windows and doors and saw carriages passing through the streets late at night, heading towards the palace. The people have different opinions about this. Some people say that this is the elixir of immortality that His Majesty ordered to be refined. Some people say that it is a secret treasure sent as tribute from the western regions. After all, guessing is just guessing as to what is in those boxes. Still a mystery. In the royal study room in the palace, Chen Huang looked at a list in front of him and couldn't suppress the smile on his face. After Tang Ning arrived in Jiangnan, in the past few months, people had been brought back one after another, totaling 18 million taels of gold and silver, and various rare treasures worth more than 10 million taels. In other words, Tang Ning alone supported Chen Guo's tax revenue for 3 years. All the money went into the inner palace. As an emperor, he has never been so rich. Emperor Chen stood up and said, it is difficult for him to be promoted in a short time. When he comes back this time, should I give him a title, Jews? As soon as he finished speaking, a eunuch hurried in, held up a secret letter, and said, Your Majesty, Runzo 800 li is urgent. Chen Huang sat back and said loudly, send it up. A few days ago, he did not send a message urgently for 800 miles for the 5 million taels of silver shipped from Kuzhu. Is it so solemn this time that it exceeds 10 million taels? The eunuch hurriedly handed over the secret letter. Emperor Chen couldn't wait to tear open the envelope and cast his eyes on it. The western regions, the grasslands, the south of the Yangtze River. The next moment, he stood up suddenly and looked at the secret message in his hand. His eyesight turned black and he couldn't help but feel dizzy. After taking a few steps back, he fell directly to the ground. Wei Jian's expression changed drastically. He hurriedly stepped forward to help him up, and said anxiously, Imperial Physician, tell the Imperial Physician quickly. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 598. Remember it in 1 second and read wonderful novels for free without pop-ups. No need. Chen Huang lost his mind for a moment, but regained his composure the next moment, pushed Wei Jian away, stood up, and said with a livid face, Summon the king. Lu Ding, Minister of War, Zhou Jinyu General Wei Lingwu entered the palace. Except for the king and prime minister, these people were all generals who held real power. When Chen Huang read the names of these people, Wei Jian's expression became serious. He looked at the young eunuch and said, I ordered all the eunuchs to leave the palace and summon these adults into the palace immediately. When the emperor summons his ministers, he usually sends eunuchs out of the palace to summon them, but in most cases, only one person is sent out at a time. This is the first time that all the eunuchs are sent out of the palace to summon them. The first person who realized the seriousness of the situation was the Hanlin Academy located in the imperial palace. A Hanlin attendant looked in the direction of the royal study and said in shock, What's going on? Why did your majesty summon such a great general today? Although the generals of the 16th Guards usually do not hold real power and do not care about government affairs, and the specific affairs are left to the generals and Zhonglang generals, each of the generals of the 16th Guards is a legend in the military, and he is still. It was the first time to see so many legends appear in the palace at the same time. The Hanlin bachelor walked out of the Hanlin Academy quickly, looked at the figures in front of him, with a hint of worry on his face, and said, I'm afraid something big is going to happen. In the imperial study, the faces of Wang Xiang, Lu Ding, and several generals were extremely solemn. A few days ago, the DPRK and the central government had a heated discussion about the continued expansion of the Wanyan tribe and the gradual rise of Zioan in the western region. However, since the situation was not urgent, the officials did not take it seriously. They were ignored by Prime Minister Feng and Jiangnan officials. After the matter was delayed, the matter was completely shelved. What I didn't expect was that when I heard the news about the grassland and the western region again in just over a month, it was already shocking. The Wanyan tribe of the grassland united with the Zioan kingdom in the western region to cause chaos in the northwest, and the remnants of the Liang kingdom in the south of the Yangtze River were in rebellion. Under the attack from the north and the south, the Chen kingdom had no time to take care of everything. The northwest has been the enemy of the central plains since ancient times and must deploy heavy defense forces. As a result, Jiangnan is very likely to fall. If Jiangnan falls, Chengguo will lose its financial and food support. Once a stalemate forms with the northwest, the treasury will be empty sooner or later. By then, the huge Chen state may be in danger of national subjugation. In the past few years, although there has been constant friction between Chen state and the grassland, it has stabilized in the past 2 years. The country is even more stable and the people live in peace. Who would have thought that in the blink of an eye, life and death would have come? Lu Ding cupped his hands and said, Your Majesty, The Northwest is an important area and there is no room for failure. The Ministry of War will raise armaments as quickly as possible to reinforce the Northwest. Ling Wu continued, Shazhou and Suzhou have insufficient troops compared to the North. We should mobilize troops immediately to defend against the Zioan incident. The king looked solemn and said, Your Majesty, there is something unusual in the grassland. In addition to increasing the number of troops, the imperial court should immediately send an envoy to notify the Chu state for help. This is a foolproof strategy. The issue of the western regions and the grasslands has been discussed countless times in the court, and mature countermeasures have been developed for a long time. However, it was already very difficult for Chen Guo to deal with the grasslands and the western regions at the same time, and he could no longer take care of Jiangnan. After Emperor Chen issued a few orders, the king raised his head and said, Your Majesty, the grasslands of the western regions can be stopped, but the chaos in Jiangnan. Emperor Chen's face softened slightly and he said, Tang Iking's secret letter said that Jiangnan is completely under his control and nothing will be lost. He only needs the court to prepare the defense in the northwest. Wang Xiang was relieved and said, Since Mr. Tang said so, Your Majesty can rest assured. The Chen state's national strength is not weak. If it had not been caught off guard by the western regions and grasslands, but had taken precautions, it would not have fallen into a passive situation in a short time. Of course, the premise is that Jiangnan can serve as a solid backing for the Central Plains and there will be no trouble. After arranging all this, Chen Huang breathed a sigh of relief and said slowly, I hope he won't disappoint me. Your Majesty, there is no need to worry. Wei Jian smiled and said, Master Tang has always been on target. He said there is nothing wrong with Jiangnan, so there will be nothing wrong with Jiangnan. Your Majesty will just sit in the palace and wait for his good news. Runzhou. Bai family. As one of the four major families, the Bai family is powerful and has countless followers. At this time, in the Bai family, many wealthy gentry and businessmen from Runzhou are crowded in the hall. They are talking to each other, and the atmosphere is extremely noisy. President Bai, the court is not prepared to give us a way to survive. What can we do? Businessmen are human beings too, and the court has gone too far. Yes, President, please say something. Each of the four major families has its own chamber of commerce. The head of the Bai family is the president of the Bai Chamber of Commerce and the backbone of many members of the Chamber of Commerce. The head of the Bai family looked at them and said, Everyone, please be patient. What you heard are all based on rumors and baseless things. Don't get into trouble. So many people have been caught and their homes ransacked. How can this be false? Jiangnan West Road has been passed, and it is our turn next. We can't just sit back and wait for death. When the atmosphere became noisy again, the head of the Bai family patted the table and said, Don't worry, Mr. Bai will follow up on this matter closely. Before that, I hope you won't be impatient, let alone listen to rumors and follow what others say. The head of the Bai family is still very prestigious in the minds of everyone. After he settled down the wealthy squires, they left the Bai mansion one by one. Before the head of the Bai family could breathe a sigh of relief, a servant of the Bai family came to report. Young Master Xiao of the Xiao mansion invited him to see him. Although the Xiao family started late, it has developed extremely fast. Now it is on par with the four major families. The head of the Bai family did not hesitate and said, Invite him in. When the Crown Prince of Guizhou entered the hall, the head of the Bai family personally greeted him and said, Young Master Xiao is here. Mr. Bai is welcome from afar. Prince Jian smiled and said, Master Bai, you're welcome. The two of them sat down separately, and after exchanging a few words, the head of the Bai family looked at him and asked, Master Xiao is here today, but is it about the court's attitude towards Jiangnan? The Crown Prince of Guizhou was startled. Unexpectedly, before he spoke, the head of the Bai family entered the topic himself, somewhat disrupting his plan. He soon calmed down, nodded and said, "Yes, I wonder what the Bai family master thinks about this matter." The head of the Bai family sighed and said, "Young Master Xiao must have seen it." The court did this, and the Chamber of Commerce was in chaos. Bai also had a headache. Prince Jian looked at him and said seriously, "Jiangnan provides money and food to the court, but the court treats Jiangnan like this. What is there to be loyal to such a court? Since they are unkind, don't blame us for being unjust. The worst we can do is overthrow them." Jiangnan self-reliance. The head of the Bai family looked shocked and said, "Master Xiao, you can't say this nonsense. It's easy for the imperial court to pacify Jiangnan. To rebel is to seek death." The crown prince of Guizhou smiled mysteriously and said, "If at this time, there happens to be a large-scale attack in the western regions and the grasslands, and the court has no time to take care of it, and Jiangnan takes advantage of the situation, how long can the Chen court survive under the attack from the north and the south?" The head of the Bai family looked at him, confused. Could it be? "That's right." Prince Jian nodded and said, "We have united the Wanyan tribe and the Zioan kingdom in the western regions. When the Jiangnan uprising succeeds, they will immediately send troops. By then, will the court still have the energy to take care of us?" The head of the Bai family looked at him and said, "But with just you, even if you start an uprising in Jiangnan, it won't be easy to succeed." The crown prince of Guizhou looked at him and said with a smile, "To be honest, more than half of the states in the east of the Yangtze River are controlled by us. Does Mr. Bai still think that we don't have the strength?" The head of the Bai family stood up in shock and asked, "Is this true?" The crown prince of Guizhou said calmly, "I will not lie about this kind of thing." The head of the Bai family looked at him and said, "If it is an insignificant state capital and is of no great use to the uprising, I dare to ask Mr. Xiao, which states do you control?" Prince Jian smiled and said, "Taizhou, Yuezhou, Jianzhou. These states are all important state capitals in Jiangnan East Road." The head of the Bai family changed his expression, looked at him, and asked, "Young Master Xiao came to the Bai family this time, does he want my Bai family to help you start a fight?" Prince Jian looked at him and asked, "What do the Bai family think?" The head of the Bai family looked at him and asked, "Does our Bai family still have a choice?" Prince Jian smiled and said, "No." The head of the Bai family shook his head helplessly, clasped his fists and said, "In that case, from now on, the Bai family will only follow the Xiao family's lead." Prince Jian looked at him and said, "As long as the Bai family sincerely helps me, the Xiao family will never treat you badly in the future." After finalizing the matter, the two talked secretly for a long time before Prince Jian left the Bai family. The negotiation with the Bai family was much easier than that of the Su family. The success even made him feel a bit fake. But if he thought about it carefully, in the face of absolute strength, the Bai family had no choice but to surrender if they wanted to protect themselves. There was a smile on his face, as if he had seen the scene of occupying the south of the Yangtze River, going straight into Guizhou, restoring the Liang kingdom, destroying Chenping-chu, conquering the western grassland, and pacifying the western Tibet. At the same time, inside the White House, the head of the Bai family walked around to the back hall. His face no longer looked shocked. He cupped his hands to a young man sitting drinking tea and said, "Master Tang, according to the Crown Prince of Guizhou, Taizhou, Yuezhou, Jianzhou, has fallen into their hands. Adults must take precautions early." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 599. Remember it in 1 second, read the wonderful novel for free without pop-up window. The Prince of Qian is indeed a man who can do great things. He is extremely sincere and trustful to his partners. He showed his sincerity when he first visited them. There are 15 states in the east road of Jiangnan. It is too troublesome to run one by one. After the Prince of Qian reported his power, Gong Sunying could carry out precise strikes. The Bai family was supported by the local government at the instruction of the court. The purpose was to share a piece of the pie with the three major families. In order to facilitate the operation, this line was usually buried very deep and would not be used at non-critical moments. Just by looking at the superb acting skills of the patriarch of the Bai family, we can tell that he is a man who can do great things. Tang Ning put down his teacup, stood up, and said, "If the Prince of Chien has any unusual movements, please report at any time." The patriarch of the Bai family bowed and said, "Yes, the Bai family will keep a close eye on the Xiao mansion." Before Gong Sunying was done, Tang Ning could not take action against the Prince of Chien for the time being. He wanted not only to catch the culprit of this rebellion, but also to prevent Jiangnan from being in chaos. If any place in Jiangnan was in chaos, it would be a troublesome thing to pacify it again. Before that, it would be better to watch the performance of the Prince of Chien and the Su family seriously. When sending Tang Ning out of the back door of the Bai family, the head of the Bai family thought of something, looked at him, and asked, "Sir, the Prince of Chien will definitely try to win over the Shen family and the Song family. Do you want to remind them?" Tang Ning looked at him, thought for a while, and asked, "Wang Xiang and Feng Xiang are both veterans of 3 dynasties. Feng Xiang's qualifications are older than Wang Xiang. Does the head of the Bai family know why Wang Xiang is still Wang Xiang, but Feng Xiang has ended up with a disgrace in his later years?" The head of the Bai family was stunned and shook his head and said, "I don't know." Tang Ning smiled and said, "Because Wang Xiang never meddles in other people's business." The head of the Bai family was stunned again, and it took a long time for him to react. He looked up at Tang Ning and bowed his hands and said, "I understand." Tang Ning waved his hand and said, "Let's go." The head of the Bai family bowed and said, "Farewell, sir." Tang Ning once thought about winning over the 3 major families to fight against the Prince of Chien, but when he found out the bottom card of the Prince of Chien, he changed his mind. This is just like playing landlord. When you find out that the opponent's trump card is just like that and every step he takes is within your expectations, who wouldn't want to put a few more bombs before winning? The 3 major families have been eating more and more ugly in recent years. We have to find a reason to make them spit out a little. The overall situation in Jiangnan has been determined. I hope that Emperor Chen can be more reliable and not let the western regions and the grassland take advantage of the situation. There are only 2 years left in the 3-year agreement. In these 2 years, he just wants to live in peace. In the Bai family, the head of the Bai family returned to the hall and sat down. Not long after, a servant of the Bai family brought him a card. "This is a card inviting him to a banquet tonight." The card was sent by the Xiao mansion. In addition to the Bai family, the Su family, the Shen family, and the Song family were also invited. In this way, the 4 major families are considered to be gathered. Seeing the names of the Song family and the Shen family, thinking of Tang Ning's words that seemed to have a deep meaning just now, the head of the Bai family put down the card, breathed a sigh of relief, and murmured, "This is fishing." Xiao Mansion. The Prince of Chien was sitting in the hall. A servant of the Xiao family came in and bowed, saying, "My prince, the 4 major families have all replied and will arrive tonight." The Prince of Chien smiled and said, "Okay." It was his plan to win over the 4 major families. The 4 major families have a great influence in Jiangnan. With the 4 major families, he can avoid many obstacles if he wants to start an uprising in Jiangnan. The Bai family was the last family he went to, and it was also the easiest one. When he tried to win over the Shen and Song families, he was actually rejected at the beginning. He used some means, coercion and inducement to win over the Shen and Song families. The head of the Bai family was obviously more discerning than the 2 of them, and he didn't have much trouble in the Bai family. Now that the 4 major families have all been in his hands, everything is ready, only the east wind is missing. After tonight, the deployment of Runzhou has been completed. He only needs to send a message to the various states to cooperate with him in the uprising, and the east road of Jiangnan will fall into his hands completely. Most of the states in Jiangnan are easy to attack and difficult to defend. If he wins the east road of Jiangnan and controls the entire Jiangnan, will it be far away? The preparations before the uprising were about to be completed. He breathed a sigh of relief and finally had time to deal with other things. He looked at the servant of the Xiao mansion and asked, "Is Su Mei at home?" The servant said, "I don't think I've seen the girl leave the mansion in the past 2 days." "Heh, are you bored?" The Prince of Qian showed a sneer on his face, stood up and said, "Let's go and take a look." Xiao Mansion, a quiet courtyard. The climate in Jiangnan has always been good, and today it is even more clear and the breeze is gentle. The courtyard is lush and green, with occasional flowers dotted, and the fragrance is overwhelming. Su Mei is swinging on the swing alone in the yard, looking ahead, but her eyes are a little wandering. She is more beautiful than the scenery, but she is excluded by the scenery. The footsteps coming from the door broke the silence. The Prince of Qian walked into the yard and saw the figure sitting on the swing. He couldn't help licking his lips, and the desire in his eyes was hard to conceal. In front of this woman, most men can't restrain the primitive desire in their hearts. The Prince of Qian took a deep breath, walked forward, and asked with a smile, "Young lady, you are quite interested today." He stretched out his hand and wanted to push the swing, but Su Mei had already got off the swing, stepped back, and bowed slightly, "Greetings, Prince." There was a hint of gloom in the eyes of Prince Jian, and he retracted his outstretched hand. The next moment, a smile appeared on his face again, and he said, "Now great things are about to happen. When we completely control the south of the Yangtze River and enter the land of Guizhou, it will be the day of restoration at the time of the country. When the time comes, what I have said will still be valid." Su Mei kept a certain distance from him, looked at him, and asked, "What did the prince say?" Su Mei forgot. "The girl has forgotten, but I have not forgotten." Prince Jian looked at her and said, "When the restoration of the country is successful and I ascend the throne as emperor, I will grant the girl the position of a noble concubine." This sentence, I the prince will never forget it. A month ago, he did think so. But now, all he wants is the most beautiful woman in the world. How can one become a noble concubine if she is a fallen flower? Su Mei understands the prince's wishes. Su Mei looked at him, shook her head and said, "It's just that as a disciple of Wanggu sect, Su Mei has another mission. The position of noble concubine should be left to others. If the girl is worried about the Wanggu sect, there is no need to." Prince Jian waved his hand and said, "The members of the Wanggu sect are also the people of the Liang kingdom. When the time comes, will they dare to resist the decree and disrespect it?" "The crown prince has misunderstood." Su Mei looked at him, smiled sweetly, and said, "Besides that, the most important reason is that Su Mei already has her own heart, so it is naturally impossible for her to become the crown prince's concubine." The crown prince of Guizhou no longer wanted to pretend to be elegant, so he looked at her gloomily and said, "Su Mei, my patience has its limit." Su Mei looked at him with the same smile and asked, "Who doesn't?" The Prince of Guizhou looked at her for a long time, smiled instead of angry, and said, "Whatever I want, I will definitely get. If I don't get it, I don't mind destroying her." He glanced at Su Mei, turned around and walked out. When I walked to the door, there were footsteps in front of me. The Crown Prince of Guizhou raised his head and glanced at Bai Jin, who was walking over, and said coldly, "Bai Chongfeng, you are such a good disciple. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 600. Chapter 597, Night Visit. Bai Jin walked into the courtyard and Su Mei sat on the swing again. Su Mei looked at her and asked, Which one is more important in your eyes, the Wangu sect or the crown prince of Gizhu? Baijin frowned slightly and said, I will persuade the crown prince to give up his thoughts about you. Sumei swayed on the swing and said lazily, if he had listened to you, he would not have done such a stupid thing as rebelling in Jiangnan. If they fail, what will you do? Baijin's expression remained unchanged. She had no expectations for this, and said, when His Majesty the King of Gizhu came to Jiangnan, he just wanted to find a hiding place. He did not put his hope of restoring the country in Jiangnan. The prince is here. If you fail once, you will remember this lesson, which is not necessarily a good thing. Sumei stopped the swing and looked at her. Do you know he will fail? The rain is about to come in Runzhou. Your god brother still wants to take the third lady to the lake to enjoy the scenery. He knows all this, but the Xiao family is still in peace. Baijin looked at her, said, he doesn't care about the prince's rebellion at all. Why does the prince succeed? Sumei jumped off the swing and said, if this fails, the prince will have to rely on you. Your calculation is not bad. You don't need to worry about these things. Baijin glanced at her and said, as long as you remember, don't waste your martial arts and gu skills. Your qualifications are better than those of your uncle Gongsun. In our lineage, in the future it depends on you to revive. Baijin gave her a few serious instructions and left the yard. Sumei walked towards the room, shaking her head and saying, I only see the new people smiling, but the old people cry. You go out to the lake to enjoy the scenery. You have no conscience, you have no conscience. Tang Yaoyao grew up in the north, and this was her first time coming to Jiangnan. Except for complaining to him about the rain in Jiangnan on the second day after arriving, I was completely intoxicated by the scenery and people in Jiangnan. Tang Ning took her to swim in the lake today and enjoy the scenery. When they came back, the two of them ate from the street to the end of the street. When they returned to the room, she caressed her slightly bulging belly and leaned against the bed with a careless expression. Extremely lazy. At a certain moment, she looked up at Tang Ning and said, when your matter is over, let's stay in Jiangnan for a few more days. Although Tang Ning really wanted to agree to Tang Yejing, the entire court must be concerned about the chaos in Jiangnan. After settling the matter here, he had to rush back to Beijing without stopping, and he could only live in the world of two people on the road. Tang Ning didn't agree to her, so Tang Yaoyao looked a little depressed. She looked at the window and asked in surprise, why hasn't she come over in the past 2 days? Tang Ning looked at Tang Yaoyao and asked in surprise, do you really want her to come over? The fact that Fairy Tang could ask such a question was beyond his expectation. From Tang Ning's point of view, she should hope that Sumei would never come over. Didn't you say that her insomnia can only be cured here? Tang Yaoyao rolled her eyes at him and asked, how come she calls her mother mother? In your eyes, I am so unreasonable person. No, Tang Ning shook her head and said, in my eyes, you are not only reasonable, but also innocent, gentle, and kind, and you can live in an IKEA home. Since you care about her so much, why don't I ask her to come over to sleep? Tang Yaoyao wanted to say no, but thinking of the haikou she just boasted about, wouldn't this be a slap in the face to herself, so she could only wave her hand and pretend to be generous. Go ahead. There were many experts in the Xiao mansion, so Tang Ning couldn't go there alone. He walked to the door of Lao Zheng's room and knocked on the door. Lao Zheng, wearing a thin shirt, opened the door and asked, it's so late, what's wrong? Tang Ning looked at him and urged, hurry up and get dressed, let's go to Xiao mansion. Lao Zheng asked, why are you going to Xiao mansion so late? Tang Ning said, pry out information on the enemy. Lao Zheng looked at him, unsure of the passage, are you sure you went to Xiao mansion so late to spy on the enemy? Tang Ning rolled her eyes at him and asked, why else could it be spying? Not sure if it was an illusion, but Tang Ning always felt that after Lao Zheng came to Jiangnan, he suddenly became more talkative. He used to be incapable of beating a fart with 3 sticks. However, this did not affect his strength. After all, he still relied on him for protection, so Tang Ning didn't care about his nonsense. The Xiao family is very big, but Tang Ning has a detailed drawing of the Xiao residence, but she doesn't know which courtyard Su Mei lives in, so she needs to check it out first. It was night, and two black shadows lightly crossed the wall of Xiao mansion and landed in a certain garden. Tang Ning was very confident in her self-portrait skills. It was night again, so unless a pervert like Lao Zheng, no one else could easily spot him. When the two of them were investigating one courtyard after another, in a brightly lit room in the Xiao mansion, the heads of the four major families were already seated. The crown prince of Kiz, who picked up the wine glass, gestured slightly to the four of them, and said, "To accomplish this great event, we need the help of several people. I would like to propose a toast to the four of you." The heads of the four major families, Su, Bai, Shen, and Song, also raised their wine glasses and paid him a distant respect. After Su Jia finished the glass of wine, he said, "The four major families have been rooted in Jiangnan for tens or hundreds of years. They have been inseparable from Jiangnan for a long time. The imperial court wants to drive us out. How can the four major families just sit back and wait for death? It should be us who want to thank you, His Highness the Crown Prince, for what Brother Su said is absolutely true. We want to thank His Highness the Crown Prince." The rebellion was a serious matter. Although the heads of the Shen and Song families were worried, the entire Jiangnan East Road had fallen into the hands of others. Rebellion was risky, and if they did not rebel, they would be exterminated immediately. They had no choice but to agree with Sujet. The head of the Bai family took a sip of wine, looked at the Prince of Qian, and asked, "May I ask, Prince, should we help His Highness?" What the head of the Bai family asked is what I will say next. The Prince of Qian looked at him approvingly and said, "Over the years, most of Jiangnan East Road has been controlled by me, but Jiangnan West Road still needs the help of the four major families. I need you to incite public opinion in Jiangnan West Road. Once Jiangnan West Road is in chaos, our chance will come. Incite public opinion." The head of the Bai family cupped his hands and smiled, "Don't worry, Prince, this matter is up to us." While the wine was flowing in the hall, Tang Ning had found Su Mei's residence in another part of the Xiao mansion. As soon as he and Lao Zheng jumped into the yard, they found a swing hanging under the tree in the yard. There was also such a swing in the small courtyard of Tianrunju, and Tang Ning often stood behind her and pushed her. Lao Zheng glanced forward and said, "There is someone in the room." Hearing the sound coming from the door, Tang Ning turned sideways and hid behind the tree. Inside the room, a maid retreated to the door, looked at Su Mei, and said, "Miss, have a good rest, I'm leaving." Su Mei lay on the bed, heard the door close, closed her eyes, but still didn't feel sleepy. Hearing the noise coming from the room again, she was about to ask the maid what was going on, but she suddenly opened her eyes, sat up from the bed, and said sternly, "Who is it?" Tang Ning was startled, and quickly stretched out his finger and said, "Shh, keep your voice down." Su Mei looked at him, and was stunned at first. After rubbing her eyes, she jumped off the bed in surprise, ran to his side, and asked, "Why are you here?" Tang Ning looked at her and said, "Yao Yao asked me to call you to sleep." Su Mei was stunned when she heard it, and looked at him, uncertain. "3 people." She hesitated for a moment, and without waiting for Tang Ning to answer, she said to herself, "As long as she agrees, 3 people is not impossible." Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 601. She said you couldn't sleep here, so she asked you to sleep at the post station. Tang Ning looked at Su Mei, confused for a moment, and asked, "You just said 3 people, what for 3 people? 3 people playing mahjong are still short of 1 person, and Xiao Tao is not here, otherwise they can make up the number." At a certain moment, a light flashed in Tang Ning's mind, looking at her, and asked in disbelief, You mean, the three of us? What are you thinking? Su Mei was embarrassed and annoyed, and knocked him on the head, saying, you can think of such a ridiculous thing. It's not enough to have so many wives, and you don't even let your sister go. What I mean is. Tang Ning thought for a while, and said, you sleep in one room, we sleep in another room, and I'll go over when you fall asleep. Too much trouble. Su Mei waved her hand and said, I'm too lazy to go over. Tang Ning didn't want to insist, lest she think he really had any improper thoughts about her, so he said, then you sleep, and I'll leave when you fall asleep. Su Mei lay back on the bed and closed her eyes obediently. As if she felt uncomfortable in her clothes, she threw her coat out of the quilt and casually threw it on the bed. Tang Ning shook her head, folded her clothes for her and put them on the bedside. The more Tang Ning understood her, the more she realized that her face in front of people was far from her true self. In front of people, she was the most beautiful woman in the capital, but behind people, she was a sensitive girl who lacked a sense of security. Although she looked like she was no longer a girl, she was still a girl in her heart. This kind of charming woman, who sometimes reveals a little shyness of a girl, is the most popular with normal men. She can control sexiness and act cute. Most men have no resistance to such women. God gave her a charming appearance and a figure that thousands of women envy, but also gave her a tragic life experience, which can't be regarded as a great love for her. Lack of sleep will lead to aging. It is not a solution for her to be unable to sleep all the time. Tang Ning sat on the bed, thinking about whether there is any way to solve the problem once and for all. At a certain moment, he suddenly raised his head and looked at the door, his face changed. At the same time, Su Mei, who was lying on the bed, also opened her eyes suddenly. Before Tang Ning could react, she grabbed his wrist and brought him to the bed, covering him with the quilt. There were footsteps outside the door. It was obviously not Lao Zheng. Someone came in. Lao Zheng did not remind him. What on earth was he doing outside? This thought flashed through his mind, and Tang Ning's attention was attracted by something else. Su Mei had just thrown her clothes out of the quilt, wearing only a belly band and underwear. Tang Ning was pressed into the quilt by her, facing her smooth jade back and smelling a faint fragrance. Su Mei gently twisted his arm and whispered, don't blow, it's itchy. Tang Ning held his breath to avoid his exhaled breath from touching her body. He had just closed the door, but now someone stepped on it and pushed it open violently, and the bolt broke. The Prince of Qian walked in from outside, drunk, and said swayingly, Miss, you went to bed early today. In a short time, Su Mei had put on her coat, sat up from the bed, and said coldly, I have rested, if you have anything, come back tomorrow. The Prince of Qian hiccuped and laughed, Miss, I am afraid you don't know that some things are only interesting at night. He walked towards the bed while taking advantage of the alcohol and said, if you don't accept the toast, you will be punished. If you don't want the concubine given to you, Jiangnan will soon fall into the hands of this prince. Do you think this prince will let a withered flower be my concubine? He snorted coldly and said, if you know what's good for you tonight, you will have a place in this prince's harem. If you don't know what's good for you. Before the Prince of Qian finished speaking, Su Mei said calmly, if you take another step forward, don't blame me for being rude. What can you do? Hiss, the Prince of Qian sneered and was about to speak, but suddenly took a breath of cold air, his body trembled, and he lowered his head suddenly, and found that a purple-black scorpion had climbed onto his feet at some point. Su Mei glanced at him and said without any expression, if no one detoxifies you within an incense stick, the prince can prepare to see the prince. You. The pain from the feet made the Prince of Qian sober up instantly, and pointed at her with a frightened face. The next moment, he turned his head and ran out of the room. Su Mei didn't let him breathe. Tang Ning came out of the quilt and took a few deep breaths. When he saw the purple-black scorpion on the ground, his face changed. He suddenly opened the quilt and asked, "There won't be such things in the quilt." There was no purple-black poisonous scorpion in the quilt, only long white legs. Sumei was only wearing a pair of pink underwear that barely reached her thighs, and her upper body was wrapped in outer clothes. After Tang Ning opened the quilt, the scenery inside the quilt was clearly revealed. Although they had slept in the same bed for so long, they were both wearing clothes. This was the first time Tang Ning had seen such a big scene. Sumei looked at him with a smile and asked, "Does it look good?" "Good." Tang Ning subconsciously said good and just closed his mouth again, covered the quilt again, jumped off the bed, closed the door, frowned and asked, "Did the Prince of Qian force you to marry him?" Sumei put on her clothes and asked, "Do you want to help me?" "If I don't help you, who will?" Tang Ning glanced at her and asked, "Have you forgotten what I said at that time?" Sumei was surprised and said, "What did you say?" Tang Ning said, "If you were forced to marry, I would protect you like I protected Xiao Man." Sumei was stunned, and suddenly a smile broke out on her face. She asked, "Do you still remember this?" "Of course I remember what I said." Tang Ning looked at her and said, "The Prince of Qian has bad intentions towards you. You should go to the post station with me tonight." Sumei was obviously in a good mood. She waved her hand and said, "I will go back with you. Your third wife will not be happy even if she doesn't say it. Don't worry about me. I will go to the master's room tonight. He can't do anything to us." Sumei didn't want to go, and Tang Ning couldn't force her. He believed Sumei. If she said it was okay, it really didn't matter. He walked into the yard, looked at Lao Zheng sitting on the swing, and asked, "Why didn't you remind me just now?" "He's alone, what can happen?" Lao Zheng glanced at him and asked, "How was it exciting just now?" Tang Ning asked, "What's exciting? Isn't it written in the book?" Lao Zheng looked at him and asked, "When a man and a woman are alone in a room, when they are discovered, the man should either hide in the bathtub or hide in the bed. Where did you hide just now?" Tang Ning found that Lao Zheng had really become bad. He thought he had long gotten rid of the low tastes, but he didn't expect that he had become even lower now, no, vulgar. What book was he reading? Lao Zheng looked at him and continued to ask, "Does Miss Sue's quilt smell good?" Recalling the scene just now, Tang Ning nodded and said, "It smells good. Not only is it fragrant, but it is also white and long." He didn't find out anything about the enemy tonight, but he accidentally learned another thing. The Prince of Qian actually had ill intentions towards Sumei and wanted to take her into the harem. Even he didn't dare to have such a bold idea. He deserved to be stung by the scorpion. In another room of the Xiao mansion, an old man cut the wound on the Prince of Qian's foot and applied some red powder. After a long time, the black air on the Prince of Qian's face dissipated a little. It turned out to be the purple gold scorpion king. The old man's eyes flashed with a strange light, and he said, "It's been a long time since anyone has been able to train such a ferocious poisonous insect. If your highness is a little later, even the gods can't save him." The Prince of Qian looked ferocious and gritted his teeth and said, "When I have decided the big thing, I want her to live a life worse than death."